I like to look at it as if it's a room that's an exclusive room, of people who can do it to death, And he definitely opened the door and said, come on into the room. See, look, there's Aretha, there's Stevie, there's Diana, there's Dion. This is a great room. Come on in. You belong in here.
Oh, boy, this is very nice.
It's that fact that probably makes me happiest of all.
Good luck with everything. That's all he said. And, I said, oh, thanks for calling. And that was the end of the conversation. That's all. He had no other agenda. Just wanted to spread that, to me, share that with me, and that was great.
Isn't it interesting how the lives of two musicians can be so intertwined? How one act of kindness can ripple through time?
We're not musical. If I didn't have talent, musical talent somewhat, and I'd probably enjoy being a doctor. I like to make people feel better.
Still wondering what I am talking about? Well, I am talking about no other person than Luther Vandross, who it appears had some things to say to Marvin Gaye before his death. Now, Luther Vandross, a rising star at the time, looked up to Marvin Gaye, who was already a musical icon. Apparently, Marvin Gaye's kindness towards Luther Vandross opened many doors for the young artist.
I didn't know he ever even heard of me, right? And he comes over, he got my number. Luther. This is Marvin. I gotta tell you, man, I love that phrasing you're doing on my song, blah, blah, blah,
So what did Marvin Gaye see in Luther Vandross that made him want to help? How did Luther Vandross feel about receiving support from someone he admired so much?
And that's all he says, good luck with everything. That's all he said. And, I said, oh, thanks for calling. And that was the end of the conversation. I mean, just unbelievable.
Here's the thing though, Marvin Gaye's life was not just about kindness and music. He struggled with many inner demons. His life was a constant battle between his loving soul and the darker sides of his personality.
It was turmoil and traumatic for all of Marvin's life. I didn't find that out till he was dead.
How could someone so kind and talented be haunted by such darkness, you might ask? Apparently, Marvin Gaye's life was filled with ups and downs, joy and sorrow, love and pain. And it was this duality that made him a complex and fascinating figure.
I get my joy from the people, the reaction of the people. When I see the people react and that they love you and the way they are applauding and screaming.
Luther Vandross was lucky to see the kind side of Marvin Gaye. Gaye's encouragement and support played a huge role in Vandross's success. Throughout Luther's career, he achieved 11 consecutive RIAA-certified platinum albums and sold over 40 million records worldwide. But what about Gaye's own struggles? How did they affect his life and career? What were his last words to Vandross before he passed away?
Good luck with everything. That's all he said. And, I said, oh, thanks for calling. And that was the end of the conversation.
These questions leave us wanting to know more. What were his last words to Luther Vandross? How did they shape Vandross's future? Let's find out. Marvin Pence Gaye Jr. was born on April 2nd, 1939 in Washington, D.C. at Freedman's Hospital. His father, Marvin Gaye Sr., was a church minister, and his mother, Alberta Gaye, worked as a housekeeper. Marvin's first home was in a public housing project called Fairfax Apartments. This neighborhood, one of the oldest in the city, had many old houses, but most of them were in poor condition. Many buildings didn't have electricity or running water, and the area was crowded and Marvin and his friends called this area Simple City because it was part city, part country. Marvin was the second oldest of 4 children. He had 2 sisters, John and Zeola, and a brother, Frankie. He also had 2 half-brothers, Michael and Antoine. Michael was his mother's son from a previous relationship, and Antoine was born from one of his father's affairs.
Those years, my father was very strict disciplinarian. I think one of the problems that my father had with my brother was that he didn't realize that Marvin was a free spirit.
Marvin went to Cardozo High School in Washington, D.C. He started singing in church when he was only 4 years old, often with his father playing the piano. Marvin and his family were part of a strict Pentecostal church called the House of God. However, Marvin loved singing from a young age. When he was 11, he sang a song called Be My Love by Mario Lanza at a school play, which made people encourage him to become a professional singer. Marvin went to Syfax Elementary School and then Randall Junior High School. In junior high, High, he started taking singing seriously and joined the school glee club where he became a star singer. He briefly went to Spingarn High School before transferring to Cardozo High School. At Cardozo, he joined several singing groups, including the Dippers and the DC Tones. But when he was 17, Marvin dropped out of high school and joined the United States Air Force. He thought he would work on jet airplanes, but he was given menial jobs instead. Marvin was unhappy in the Air Force and pretended to be mentally ill to get out. He received a general discharge with a note from his sergeant saying he couldn't adjust to military life or follow orders.
I did a horrible stint in the Air Force. It was terrible. I got an honorable discharge under general conditions in Section 214. Something about unable to adjust to regimentation and authority.
After leaving the Air Force, Marvin Gaye and his friend Reese Palmer started a singing group called the Marquis. They sang around Washington, D.C. and got the attention of Bo Diddley, a famous musician. Bo Diddley helped them get a record deal, but their song Wyatt Earp didn't become popular. Later, Harvey Fuqua, who was a big name in music, hired the Marquis. He changed their name to Harvey and the New Moonglows, and they moved to Chicago. They recorded songs and even sang for famous artists like Chuck Berry. Marvin's first lead singing part was on a song called Mama Lucy, and then in 1960, the group broke up. Marvin moved to Detroit with Fuqua and played drums for Tri-Fi Records. During a holiday party at Motown Records, President Berry Gordy's house, Marvin impressed Gordy. Fuqua agreed to share Marvin's contract with Gordy, and soon Marvin was signed to Motown's Tamla label. At first, Marvin wanted to sing jazz music, not R&B. He even changed the spelling of his last name from Gay to Gay to stop rumors about his personal life. His first single, Let Your Conscience Be Your Guide, and the album The Soulful Moods of Marvin Gaye didn't sell well. Marvin spent most of 1961 working as a session drummer for other artists. Marvin toured with the Motortown Revue and recorded a live album at the Apollo Theater. In 1964, he made a successful duet album with Mary Wells called Together. His solo hit, How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You, became very popular. In 1967, Marvin started singing duets with Tammy Terrell. They had many hits together, but sadly, Tammy got very sick and passed away in 1970. This made Marvin very sad, and he even thought about quitting music. But in 1971, Marvin released the song What's Going On, inspired by the events of the time. It was a big hit and led to an album of the same name. The album was very successful and changed the way people thought about soul music. We've got to find our way. His songs made people happy, sad, and everything in between. But there's more to Marvin than just his music. He had a big heart and helped other musicians too. One of those musicians was Luther Vandross, as earlier mentioned. When Luther was just starting, he wasn't well known, but Marvin saw something special in him. Instead of keeping all the success to himself, Marvin helped Luther. He opened the doors for Luther, which means he gave Luther a chance to be successful. In today's music world, this is very rare. Musicians usually have to work very hard to get noticed, and not many stars help the new ones like Marvin did for Luther. Marvin's help made a big difference in Luther's life. You could say Luther owed a lot to Marvin. Without Marvin's help, Luther might not have become the star he did. This shows just how kind and generous Marvin was. He didn't have to help Luther, but he did it anyway. He wanted to see others succeed too. But Marvin Gaye was a complex person. This means there were many sides to him. On one side, he was kind and generous. On the other side, he struggled with his own problems. He had a tough time dealing with his emotions and life challenges. Marvin's kindness and struggles show the duality in his character. He was both a loving person and someone who faced many inner battles. When Marvin Gaye was growing up, he faced a lot of teasing and bullying from other kids. They would make fun of him and say things like, "Hey, you're gay, Marvin is gay." This was just childish, but it hurt Marvin a lot. To try to stop the teasing, Marvin added an E to his last name, changing it from Gay to Gay. Marvin's father was another big problem in his life. His father was very strict and would punish Marvin for almost anything. Marvin said that by the time he was 12, there wasn't a part of his body that hadn't been bruised by his father's beatings. His father had a favorite belt that made a scary sound before he would hit Marvin, and he did this on purpose to scare him even more. Marvin and his siblings believed their father enjoyed hurting them.
He would always tell Marvin that, he didn't know where he came from. "I don't know where you came from, boy. You're not mine. You know, there's too much of the devil in you.
Marvin's father never wanted him. He even told Marvin's mother, Alberta, that he didn't think Marvin was his child. He didn't love Marvin and didn't want Alberta to love him either. Marvin knew this from a very young age. Despite being a preacher, Marvin's father was a heavy drinker and had affairs. He even had a child with another woman. Alberta also had a child with another man before she married Marvin's father, and he made her send that child away.
When Marvin looked for paternal love in his childhood, what he received was not only scorn, but intolerant.
Adding to the shame, Marvin's father liked to wear women's clothes. He would dress in Alberta's clothes and shoes, and everyone in the neighborhood knew about it. Kids would tease Marvin, calling him and his dad names because of this. But it wasn't just the cross-dressing that was the problem. It was the violent outbursts and brutal treatment that really scarred Marvin. His father made the children recite Bible verses and beat them if they made mistakes. He even withheld food from them, saying it would bring them closer to God.
His father was a strange man by any measure. He was a man who wore female clothing. He's a man that Marvin was ashamed of.
Marvin's father also got very angry whenever Alberta showed affection to Marvin. He even accused them of having an inappropriate relationship, which was not true. Marvin described living with his father as living with a cruel and unpredictable king. His father wanted to control everything through violence, and Marvin received the most punishment because he was different and did things his own way. His relationship with his father got worse during his teenage years, and his father often kicked him out of the house. He felt very sad and even thought about it, but his mother supported him and encouraged his singing, which helped him cope. Growing up with such a strict and abusive father left Marvin with deep emotional scars. It affected him for the rest of his life. His terrible childhood did pay a toll on his mental health. Probably wondering why I said that. Now let's change gear and talk about Marvin Gaye and a story about his family. This story comes from two books, Divided Soul, The Life of Marvin Gaye by David Ritz, and Trouble Man by Steve Turner.
She was older, but you know how young men like older women, and older women like younger men. And I don't think they were thinking about age, it was just an attraction.
Two books about Marvin Gaye tell a shocking tale. He had a child with his niece. Marvin Gaye, a famous singer, was married to Anna Gordy when this happened. Anna Gordy is older than Marvin by 17 years and is the sister of Motown's founder, Berry Gordy. Both books, Divided Soul, The Life of Marvin Gaye by David Ritz and Trouble Man by Steve Turner, say Anna Gordy pretended to be pregnant while married to Marvin. Marvin went along with it to keep up appearances as a happy family for the media and Motown fans.
Then I'm sure that the fact that she was the sister of the president of the record company didn't hurt any either.
In 1985, a year after Marvin Gaye was by his father, Steve told David Ritz during an interview for the biography that Marvin Gaye's son, Marvin Gaye III, was actually adopted. Reports say Marvin Gaye III only found out the truth when the biography was published. Before he died, Marvin Gaye kept this secret from his son for many years, but when he was pressed to answer who the biological parents were, Marvin Gaye would not say. Steve Turner revealed that information in his subsequent biography, and his mother did confirm that the real mother of Marvin Gaye's child was Denise Gordy. Denise was Marvin Gaye's niece by marriage and his wife Anna Gordy's niece by blood. She was also Berry Gordy's niece. At the time Marvin III was born, Marvin Gaye was 26 years old, while his niece and the mother of his child was 15. It seems that a big motive to hide the truth all of those years was to keep Marvin from being jailed for statutory R. Word on the street was that Marvin Gaye was openly dating the young girl who would become his second wife in the same year that Anna Gordy divorced him. Marvin Gaye was 34 years old when he started dating Janice Hunter, who would become his second wife at the time she was 17. As far as the conception of Marvin Gaye III was concerned, it appears to be a family affair, and everyone was on board. Apparently Anne was too old and unable to conceive. Marvin wanted a child, and Denise just wanted to give them what they wanted. Denise Gordy herself said, "My aunt was unable to have children, and I had one for her. It was as simple as that." Following his affair and second marriage, Marvin set about creating his ideal woman. But as Janice failed to meet his expectations, the relationship blew apart. Infidelity led to jealousy and quickly turned to rage. In Marvin Gaye's words, "For all my problems now, I was much I guess you can imagine when I was younger, I was probably totally uncontrollable. I'm very stubborn, I'm arrogant, I'm egotistical, I'm also lovable, I'm also warm. I'm a lot of things, but it depends. I'm principled, I am probably quite schizophrenic, I'm very difficult to live with. I don't imagine any woman could live with me for any appreciable amount of time. It's been proven all my life, and I'm afraid I'll accept the absolutely worst rock bottom moment in the last 7 years when I tried to commit S-side through an overdose. I was depressed because I was very much in love with my wife at the time, and I couldn't bear the thought of the rejection. My ego is much too wild to accept rejection. I was rejected, and I had to learn the lessons of rejection, and it's done a great deal to heal my ego, and to make me realize that I am probably not the king of the earth as I've always felt I was.
I'm too depressed. I'm a bit of a manic depressant anyway. Most of the time I put on quite a face and an act, but I'm pretty depressed most of the time anyway.
But the scandals didn't end there. In recent interviews, Quincy Jones dropped a bombshell claiming that Marvin Gaye had been intimate with Marlon Brando. Marvin's younger sister Zola responded to the shocking revelations, calling it horrible and vindictive. She questioned how Jones could make such claims about the dead who couldn't defend themselves. While Richard Pryor, another person Jones linked with Brando, hinted at his and his stand-up, Marvin maintained his stating in his biography, Divided Soul, The Life of Marvin Gaye, S. Yulee, men don't interest me. Marvin's not here to defend himself or say anything. But hey, I wouldn't doubt it, cause back then they were all doing a lot of substances and it was free love if you catch my vibe. It was free love in that era. And I don't doubt it, cause Motown was a toxic place, and also Hollywood was a very toxic place in the 70s and 80s too, especially the music industry. It was just a wild, wild place where everybody hooked up with everybody. Men, women, animals, whatever. I kid you not, that was the vibe then. Now, in the late 70s, with Marvin drowning in a sea of debts, he owed a staggering $3 million in US taxes, equivalent to $15 million in today's time, and an additional $425,000 to his ex-wife, as part of their divorce settlement. He was terrible with money and started to evade paying his taxes. You could tell he was tired and exhausted. Yet, he talked about fighting back his demons, trying to get better mentally and spiritually.
Yeah, he fell out with me because I wouldn't loan him some money to buy some.
Oh, that's what it was over?
Yeah.
The once celebrated singer was reduced to living in an old delivery van, a stark contrast to his former opulent lifestyle, fleeing from his financial worries. Later, Marvin sought refuge in Belgium as a tax haven for the stars. It was there that he managed to shake off the shackles of his coke addiction. Then in 1982, Marvin made a triumphant return to the music scene with the release of his hit single, Healing. His comeback was marked by a successful tour in the US, but it also rekindled his destructive love affair with substances. Smokey Robinson, in a recent interview, also talked about how Marvin Gaye kicked him out of his house for not giving him money for 1980. When asked by VLAD TV if he went to Hawaii to see Marvin Gaye and if the two of them had a disagreement, Smokey responded by saying it wasn't clear if that was around the time when things went bad between them. He said, "Yeah, I remember going to Hawaii and having a falling out with Marvin. He was into at that time, and he wanted money from me to buy more. I refused, and that's when our friendship hit a rough patch." Smokey talked about how he was with him almost every day. "I saw him using and sometimes I even smoked some with him, mixed with weed. But I never did by itself or used a pipe. Marvin was struggling and I could see it clearly. He was always athletic, and I thought being in Hawaii might help him. But it didn't turn out that way. He had a house full of guys there, all partying and doing," he continued. "I was upset with him because he asked me for money again, and I refused. That's when he kicked me out of his house."
And, and he asked me to loan him some money, and I said, "No, I'm not loaning you no money to do all the you're doing. That's out of the question."
Yeah.
So he got mad at me, put me out of his house.
So you went back to the United States.
When he returned from tour, Gaye shifted his focus to caring for his mother, along with his two sisters. When Gaye returned to the family home, his father had taken a business trip to the family's home in Washington, D.C. When the elder Gaye returned to Los Angeles, he and his son continued the antagonistic relationship they had built over the years. Gaye's two sisters eventually moved out of the family house due to the quarrels between the pair. In a 1985 interview, Gaye's sister Jean claimed that her father said multiple times that if his son ever touched him, he would kill him.
I had to commit through an overdose.
Gaye entered a period of depression during this period, often discussing S-side and even attempting to jump out of a car while it was still moving. In the 1991 biography Divided Soul, The Life of Marvin Gaye, Gene Gaye told author David Ritz that there was no doubt Marvin wanted to die. While celebrating Christmas in 1983, Gaye gave his father a .38 special pistol to protect himself from potential intruders.
And the part about that is that Marvin had given his father that gun.
Yeah. to protect the house.
Yeah, he gave him that gun to
Yeah.
protect him. See, Marvin in the last few months of his life thought someone was trying to
Fast forward a few months later, a verbal argument broke out between Marvin Sr. and Gaye's mother Alberta on April 1st. Gaye attempted to mediate but largely defended his mother. When Marvin Sr. began shouting in Alberta's face, Gaye shoved his father down and began him. Marvin hit him. I shouted for him to stop, but he paid no attention to me, Alberta later told Ritz. He gave my husband some hard kicks. A few minutes later, Marvin Sr. fulfilled the threat that he had previously made. Returning with the same gun that his son had bought him a few months earlier, Marvin Sr. shot Gaye twice in the chest. Gaye's brother Frankie and his wife Irene heard the gunshots from the guest house on the property. As Frankie tended to his brother, he heard what he alleged to be Marvin's final words. "I got what I wanted. I couldn't do it myself, so I had him do it," Frankie claimed in his book Marvin Gaye, My Brother. "It's good. I ran my race. There's no more left in me."
And I guess when the police came and they asked what happened, and they asked his father if he loved his son, his father said, "Let's just say I didn't dislike him."
From his final words, Frankie and some of the other Gaye family members believed that Marvin had provoked his father into K-ing him as a form of S-side. He put himself out of his misery. He brought relief to Mother by finally getting her husband out of her life, John Gaye said in Divided Soul, and he punished Father by making certain that the rest of his life would be miserable. My brother knew just what he was doing. For his actions, Marvin Sr. pleaded no contest to a voluntary manslaughter charge. He was given a 6-year suspended sentence and 5 years of probation. Gaye's death was initially treated as an April Fool's Day joke by many, as the disturbing nature of his death proved to be too unbelievable for some. But as realization set in, the loss to music was palpable.